What I want to do now, I wanted to get to this in the first part of class, but then again, we went off the rails, I think in a good way. Here's what I want to attempt. I mentioned before, I sent you 2 documents. I want to start this, the very first couple minutes of this, with the document we were looking at last class, the first part of class. There were other paragraphs we were going to look at. Frankly, we just don't have time for those now, I don't think. But that's okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to give us some space just so we can. Well, paragraph 2 might help us a little bit. Anyway, all right. So I'll bring this up. So these are our 2 kind of beginning paragraphs. Okay, we took paragraph 1, we sort of broke it in half, and we're left with 2 things that both need to be filled in and whatever, but I think they're pretty good. They both make enough of an argument for our purposes. Here's what we want to do. Take a couple minutes. In 1 or 2 sentences, to the best of your ability, sum up whatever the arguments are in these 2 paragraphs that we have now. Okay? We're going to use that for the next thing we're going to do. So just a couple minutes. Doesn't have to be long at all. You guys need to admit.
Well, the first paragraph is well, it's lesser than the second paragraph at this point. So, was it considered to be a man, and then was it considered to be a superhero since we stepped it up?
Good.
Is that what we're going after?
Seems like it, yeah, based on what we have. Okay, sidebar real quick, I want to make sure we're all on the same page. We're about to do, God help us, we're going to try to write an introduction. Actually, that's probably good. See how that looks. I want to be sure, before we do that, you guys remember the parts of an introduction? There's a couple of them. How do we build an intro?
I don't believe so.
Okay. You can start with a hook.
Topic, hook, hook, thesis, roadmap, intro text.
Okay. Not in that order, but yes. Okay. So So it looks like this. If you're gonna have a hook, it pretty much needs to be the first thing because that's the hook, right? You hook the reader, say something interesting. But it's optional, you don't have to. The rest of this is not optional. You have to introduce the text. You have to. Be surprised. You have to, okay? First thing. Then the roadmap, which is what we're gonna talk about here in a second. And then, maybe, we'll see how it goes, but you wanna end with a thesis. Some kind of an argument that guides the rest of your paper. You're gonna spend body paragraphs breaking down the smaller elements of this thesis so that I understand it fully, okay? Let's see how we do. Where is it? Please? Yes. Go. Thank you. All right. To begin with, if you guys think of a hook at some point, feel free to share it. Rhetorical question, fact, anecdote. I mean, So we're going to skip it for right now. Okay? How are we going to introduce this text? That really comes down to you coding, actually. Because, when did it come out?
2017.
Okay. There we go.
Deadpool, played by Ryan Reynolds. Deadpool's a superhero name. Played
Well, actually, who directed it?
Tim.
It was Miller, right?
Yes, Tim Miller. Thank you. I looked it up multiple times.
It's all good. God, why can't I? You know, already I'm upset with what I've done. Let's talk about the movie itself. Screw all that. How are we going to sum up the movie in a sentence or two? Is a story, right? I'll give us that. Is a story about what?
Superhero. Or becoming a superhero.
Guy
The beginnings of superhero.
becomes a superhero. Anyway, a guy who becomes a superhero, but we can be way more specific. Because Superman is a story about a guy who becomes a superhero, right? How's this one different? Specifically. You just heinous what?
Who does heinous murder?
Right, who becomes a superhero by way of heinous violence, we'll say, as well as a fair? Sense of humor? It's funny too? Haha. Okay. Is there anything else we want to say about the movie, like summary-wise or just any other details? Like if somebody asked you right after class, hey man, I heard you guys are talking about Deadpool. I listened to your class, I'm weird. Anyway, should I see it? What do you think? Like what are some aspects you would highlight, I guess?
I'd probably ask them if you're not going to watch it with your kids, right?
Okay. And that comes down mostly to the violence?
Yes.
Well, maybe we need to double down on that then. Because we say, look, and again, we talked about connotation earlier. That communicates that, right? But it's so quick. Maybe it doesn't do the job, right? So in another sentence or so, how would we better communicate that idea? Why shouldn't I? You know, my son's going to turn 6 soon. Why shouldn't I sit down with him and watch Deadpool? He would think it's awesome, by the way. He's really into that stuff. But why not?
Well, the light one.
Nah, in fact, he hears language. So aside from that, because yeah, we're talking about this, right? Why? How would you describe it in a way that would have me go, Oh, yeah, maybe not for him. Yeah.
It's over the top.
Over the top? Cuts guys in half?
Yeah.
Is there a lot of blood?
Lots of blood.
Okay.
Cuts off his own.
Yeah, that's what. Does it grow back?
It does.
Oh, that's weird. Do you get to see it grow back?
He gets a little baby hand. He says he's gonna have fun with it. It's gonna feel like. You remember that?
That's deeply upsetting
He's
too.
gonna feel. It's gonna feel like a giant. That little baby hand.
He's making it
For sure. No, I can already tell where that's going.
pocket knife when he cuts his hands off.
Okay. Okay.
And they even have the sound effects of the bone.
This is a movie. Slightly better job, right? Okay. What have we already started doing? Now, this may or may not be a misstep. Again, this is part of drafting. You just got to see where it goes, okay? But already, we started with the movie. We started with the story, which, again, if we had a period instead of a comma, that could be any damn superhero movie. Pick one. That's all of them.
Right.
That's all of them. So we got more specific. What's interesting to me are the elements we chose to highlight, okay? That tells me they're probably important. Heinous violence, I believe that was your phrase. And then I threw in humor because he says, ha ha ha, it's very funny, okay. So we doubled down on the violence. And you guys just gave me, you kind of summed it up, and I did my best to kind of sum up what you gave me. Sounds pretty violent. If we're already that focused on that aspect, it's likely that's going to factor into our argument in some kind of way, okay? It's likely. It's not a given, but it's likely. Okay. Now, this is where you guys come in. Hopefully. I had you, to the best of your ability, try to sum up the arguments we were starting to make in those 2 paragraphs we monkeyed with in part 1 of class. The very first paragraph, what did we end up talking about? What did we end up arguing? And if you can't quite sum it up, we could start with what are the things under discussion, right? Like what are the big themes? What are the topics? Superheroes? Masculinity. And there's some other element in there too that's important. It's a P word. Power. Good. Something to do with how power, I guess, factors into those 2 other things, right? How does power function as a part of masculinity? How does power function as a part of being a superhero? Right? How does it?
You gotta have power to be great.
What do you mean by that? Sorry, the air just kicked on. Oh, it stopped. They're still working on it. I saw them outside. Anyway. There it goes. Oh, I'm gonna stop. If I get close to it, it's like she notices me. What do you mean the power to be great? What do you mean by that? Like the power to do what sorts of things, I guess. Be more specific.
Non-human.
Like what? Yeah, heal himself. In a major way, it sounds like. He still experiences pain though, right?
I think so. There's like times though he gets shot and he just shrugs it off like it's nothing.
he may not really feel it. That may be.
Well, he was prior to special forces, so I mean, he's
Yeah.
accustomed to pain.
Yeah, but like cutting off your, I mean, there's some. It sounds like. Anyway, you would if he felt pain, you would expect at certain points he'd be like, for a second, you know, because I don't care how trained you are, really. Okay. Like you mentioned him getting stabbed in the face or something. I'm like, that would take somebody down for a second, you know. You'd be like, ruined my day. Anyway, okay, it's interesting. You both kind of picked superheroes that, like Wolverine is super similar to Deadpool. I mean, he's at the end of the line, right? But it's still.
Deadpool makes fun of Wolverine.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I've heard a little bit, but they're really, yeah. Anyway, back on task. Okay, so it gives him the power to do what? Heal, you said? What else?
To be stupid, careless. He's no fear.
He has no fear. That's interesting. Okay. Here's what I'm wondering. All of this is couched within a thing, and I can't tell you that. Because it's the whole leading the horse to water business. That lack of fear, and even that ability to heal, honestly, I would say enables the movie to do certain things that maybe other movies can't quite do, you know? I'm trying to find a way to say this without just giving you the answer, because that doesn't help anybody. What else does this power, whether it's the ability to heal or enables his like lack of fear, you know? What does that enable the movie to do? To do what?
To go on.
Exaggerated.
Well, to continue, yeah. What do you mean exaggerated? What gets exaggerated?
Everything.
Well, but we gotta be specific. I agree, but specifically, what are some of the things that get exaggerated?
Wow.
Good. Just talking about it. That's how we move into our argument, I think. Okay? Alright, so where do we start? Something like these acts, we were talking about these acts of violence, right? Are enabled by so do they give it a term in the movie? Like, or did he just heals from everything? Like he literally can't die, is that
He literally cannot die.
okay.
No term.
Do what?
No term, no serum, no nothing. I mean, after he's mutated, as far as we are aware, he can't die.
Okay. They're enabled by his power, which is the, I'm trying to think of a way to describe, what kind of power is that? Like, you can't die. That, like, I'm thinking of other mutants, like Storm can control the weather. That's a wild power to have, right?
Yeah, but Wolverine can't die either.
Yeah. Well, and what,
He does.
well, I mean, I think eventually everybody can. But old age gets it, basically, right?
But invincibility.
Yeah. Well, and see, that's what I'm wondering, because like Wolverine, they call it his mutant healing factor. Like it has a term. So that's why I asked, like,
I
if.
think that's the same thing as Deadpool.
Yeah. Okay.
Because he makes fun of Wolverine's healing factor too.
Yeah.
In the movie.
Okay. So that's interesting. Okay, but they're enabled by Deadpool's power, which is. Okay, but here's where I want to get into our roadmap. Because we've now drawn a line from violence to his literal power, right? All of that is enabled, whether he's doing it to other people or doing it to himself, by his mutant power, right? The movie would be way shorter if he didn't have that power. Okay. Moreover, now we're going to say, though, we're starting making an argument about figurative power. We've set ourselves up to do that here. How are we talking about power in that first paragraph? Because we are, but it's not his mutant power, right? It's a different kind of power. What's the power we're talking about in that first paragraph?
Masculinity?
It's a part of masculinity, but how so? Like, what specifically, how do we get to this discussion of power? What's up? Control. He makes a decision. And importantly, he takes power back. He is captive. So he does not have power, but he takes it back, right? Well, I'm trying to think of a way to talk about it in the movie in general, because we're going to get very specific in the paragraph. This is a question. This is an honest question. I've not seen it. You guys have. He strikes me as the kind of guy who kind of makes decisions all the time. You know what I mean? Like I guess I'll ask it as a question. Is he the kind of guy that could be told what to do? You know what I mean?
He does have a military background, so in a sense.
Well, he'll take orders.
He would.
Would he take orders now, though?
No.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, maybe once upon a time.
I don't know, because he does take that job for that one girl. He's being like bullied.
That was prior to him going
Oh, that's interesting too, right? Isn't that interesting though? Just even the concept of taking orders. We understand why that's a thing and why it's necessary, right? But for a guy like him, it doesn't even make sense, right? The kind of guy he is, post powers, post everything, he didn't take orders from anybody, right?
That's what he won't do in the X-Men.
Sure, even that's interesting, right? Deadpool, simply put,
Not Professor X.
they don't ever call him that?
Yeah, it's colossal.
Colossal?
That's the person that fights with.
Okay. Alright, whatever. I haven't had to spell that word probably ever. Will not take orders from anyone, including Colossal, who is a representative of the X-Men.
He's a phone.
Sure, but like,
Yeah,
He's part of the X-Men team.
wait, is it Colossal or Colossus?
I think it's close.
Okay, I'm asking, because like there's a dude. Anyway, too many of these guys. Alright, we're doing including Colossal, who is a representative of the X-Men. What do we end up saying about Deadpool's making his own decisions? So what?
Actually, it is Colossus.
Oh shit. I was once a nerd. I was once a nerd. I read a lot of comics in middle school. Did I spell that? It just looks weird. Anyway. Alright. Yeah, he's got like metal skin. And, anyway, he's Russian. Okay. Well, we talked about power here. Figurative power. He makes his own decisions. So what? What's that got to do with masculinity? What's that got to do with being a superhero? For Deadpool. Do I know?
It means he likes to be in control.
What's that got to do with masculinity or being a superhero, though? We made an argument about it in that first paragraph. Well, again, the example's different. He chooses to blow himself up, remember?
Right.
So what? What's that got to do with masculinity or being a hero, a superhero? What's masculine about blowing yourself up? Choosing to blow yourself up, as opposed to what?
Letting somebody else do it.
What's masculine about that?
It's his decision.
Why is that masculine? Okay. Again, we have to be as specific as we can. It's that very specific, literal decision to take the power back. If he lets himself die, if he rolls over, as you said, right? He's letting them take control. He's letting them have power and decide for him. And he says, fuck that. I'll decide for me, right? But again, it comes down to that question of power. Which something like that, right? That's one of those masculine attributes about this guy. He will not be dictated to, right? That sort of thing. Okay. How do we get to a superhero from there? The X-Men take orders, right? All these other guys. The Avengers take orders from Iron Man, it seems like a lot of the time. What's so superhero-y about this very masculine attribute of Deadpool? He chooses to blow himself up rather than be slowly killed over a matter of days. Why does that make him a superhero? You guys remember? His mutant power. Right? So look, we've drawn a weird line, but it's an important one, between his mutant power and his figurative power, right? It's kind of a chicken and egg thing. Why does he not have to take orders from anyone? Because they can't kill him, ultimately, right? He can't be beaten down. So that, I mean, the inverse of that sort of implies the only reason anybody takes orders is because they're worried about what could be done to them. Like if you're in the military and you don't take orders, it's not like they're going to kill you. But it'll fuck up your life, right? Type of thing, in some context. So anyway, something to the effect of, is that accurate? He's pretty much always, okay. Second paragraph, what do we end up saying? That one's smaller, we didn't have time to develop it, but we're talking about something else there. What does violence have to do with being a superhero? Again, we didn't have time to fully address it. There's some good pieces there, though. Part of it is because the way I separated it, we now, I think, don't have evidence in that part. So it might help. Can either of you think about any moments in the movie that are like pretty heroic, but also probably pretty violent? Because it seems like damn near everything this guy does is pretty violent.
Where he cuts off his hand, he's again, taking back control of the situation.
Yeah. And he's been captured, right?
He's been captured.
Okay. What is he? Is he trying to save anybody from cutting off his hand, or?
Himself.
Okay. He is his own hero. So that's interesting. He's his own hero in that scene. Is he trying to help anybody else in the movie?
He's trying to save his girlfriend.
Yeah.
He's trying to save his girlfriend because she's been captured by the guy he's trying to kill.
Oh, okay. And so she's captured at the point he's cutting his hand off?
No, this is early on. The whole theme of the movie is to get the girl back.
Okay.
That's his only. I mean, like there's
Like single-minded.
right. There's nothing going to interrupt him from one killing the villain that
Yeah.
messed him up, and two getting the girl back.
Okay.
And then, because at this point he's stopping it.
Yes.
He's doing what?
He hasn't confronted his girlfriend yet because of how he's been changed. At
Yeah.
this point, he's just trying to kill the guy that made him into this.
And then she gets captured.
Yes.
And then,
At the end?
At the end.
That's shitty. Because it's the Deadpool 2.
Well, there is a Deadpool 2, but he saves her at the end.
Oh, okay, I see.
Deadpool 2 is like totally different.
Yeah. Okay. Oh man, you guys did so much there. We should have been taking notes. Okay. You said something about, you said something really good about his power in the middle of our discussion. Do you remember it all?
or he cut off his hand.
So he makes a decision to do that.
Right.
Because it's again, he's captured, he's being dictated to, and he says, I won't be dictated to.
Right.
Also, is cutting the right verb? What does he do? What does he use?
A knife, and he slowly cuts through his wrist while the bones are breaking, and blood.
When he does cut through, at least the little finger out.
He makes a. He says, "Have you ever saw the movie 128 Days?" Spoilers, and then he starts cutting off his hand.
You know what I mean? Sawing off his own hand, make sure to leave a middle finger. Dictated to. Are you guys familiar with the phrase tongue in cheek? That means it's a joke. Now again, it is, and I like that you mentioned, like it's horrific. 128 days, that's a great illusion. That's not a comedy. I've never seen the movie, but I know the story, and that's enough for me. First of all, it's based on a true story, which is fucking wild. That's wild. But again, it's absolutely, like that guy was gonna die. It was that or die. And he made the fucking decision, man, like Jesus, not to die, right? He takes that and he's like, I'll make a joke of that. It's a joke in this movie with the middle finger. Ha ha ha. Jesus Christ, right? Okay. Now we're going to say any and all of that has something to do with how this movie defines superheroes. What are we laughing at in this scene, specifically?
The grotesque. I would think that just.
You mentioned several times the blood spurting.
Yes,
Like, is it getting?
bones cracking,
Does it get on his face at all?
It gets all over Colossus' body, and it goes into his face. Yeah, the blood spatters.
Was Colossus chained up too, or something?
Yeah. Well, they're
He's holding. He's like holding.
Colossus puts a chain around his wrist and a chain around Deadpool's wrist, and he's dragging it. Because at this point, Deadpool's already broke his arm and broke his legs.
Okay.
Trying to defeat Colossus.
Okay.
So
Does Colossus not realize he's cutting off his hand?
No, not.
Oh.
The girl does. That's walking beside her. She says, "Oh my God, that's so gross." and he's already halfway through at this point. That's when Colossus looks down, he cuts through, blood all over his face, and he lifts it up in the air, and he's got the middle finger pointing at him, you know, and you say him do a backflip off the bridge onto a truck
Okay.
to save himself.
Jesus.
That's really intense.
Like I said.
Yeah. But it's this brand of hyperviolence, tongue-in-cheek though it may be, this is the hard part. There's more to be said here, not least of which because we've kind of overdeveloped it, but I really think this is what you're talking about in your paper, man, to be honest with you. I think masculinity, superheroes, violence, potentially a little bit of comedy, all of that is more than enough for a paper. It truly is. But where we're at right now, we can take a shot at a working thesis, right? So what are we getting at? I like to sum stuff up for you guys after we've... All of this seems like multiple scenes come down to this question of who is going to tell Deadpool what to do. Even when Colossus, a guy made of metal, he's made of metal, is dragging him broken behind him. He's like, you're not going to choose for me what I'm going to do. And he does the insane, the very difficult thing, cuts his own hand off, makes sure to leave out the middle finger, flies off. That's part of what makes him a hero, as well as masculine. Like, those ideas are connected. What are we saying here about superheroes and or masculinity? I'll take either one, whatever run you want to take at. What are we saying about how that stuff works?
They choose their own path.
For sure. We'll start there. And here's what's funny about that. Again, we keep talking about connotation. If we left it there, he chooses his own path. That is so vague and so devoid of the real stakes that we're talking about, right? Choosing their own path is like, my family wanted me to go into this major, but I decided this one instead. I chose my own path. Right? That's not the same as cutting your hand off. That's not quite the same. So we got to get more specific, but that's a good start. What are we talking about? Superheroes. Yeah, go ahead.
The superheroes have the power to control every aspect of their life.
Push on that a little bit. I like that. What do you mean by that?
For instance, someone in his situation where they get handcuffed,
Yeah.
like a prisoner for instance, they're automatically captured.
Yeah.
Deadpool can just cut through his hand and move on like it was nothing.
Well, even if, I mean, he mentions 128 days, so that somebody has done that, but you're probably not backflipping afterward.
But that person probably struggled for a couple days. Deadpool
Yeah.
easily just cuts his hand off.
Yeah.
Basically, he's just right back to whatever he was doing.
Yeah. Okay. So how do we talk about that? What's the very first thing you said? I'm so sorry.
Because superheroes have the power to control every aspect of their life.
Ah. Okay. So what have we done? We have introduced this question of power again, right? We're talking about power. Figurative power, not his literal power, even though we kind of have that in here too. That seems to be central to our definition of superheroes. They get to choose. Wolverine gets to choose. Take your pick. They all, even if they take orders, the other 99% of their day, yeah, no one's telling Hulk what to do, right? Okay. What's that got to do with one thing we really introduced, and we definitely got to bring it back for the thesis? All right, I'm gonna tell you guys the plates we have spinning in front of us. We got to address each one. We've done power. That's good. Okay. We've done superheroes a little bit, so we still got to deal with masculinity, I think. But we absolutely got to deal with violence. All the stuff we just said, all the stuff it seems like you're going to be talking, you got to talk about violence in this movie. Got to. It's got to be in our thesis. So what is any of this? Choosing their own path. They have the ability, right, to do that we don't. You may not be dictated to very often, but not like this, right? Okay. What has any of that got to do with masculinity? And what does it matter that all of it in this movie seems to be expressed through such violence? That's how they make these points, right? Why violence? Why make the points like that, do you think? What does violence have to do with power, have to do with masculinity?
You're killing someone, you're really.
You're taking fucking power in the situation, aren't you? Yeah? Yeah?
Can you take it back?
Yeah, you are. But real quick. No one is condoning this. This is a philosophical discussion, right? The power to live or die, or the power to choose whether someone else does, that's about as supreme a power as you can have, right? If we're talking about like masculinity essential or power essential to masculinity, yeah. Okay. Oh my God. I need the power to type. If this ultimate power Google. We keep saying power a lot. I was trying to think of another way to say it, but like, I mean, yeah, you guys kind of laughed about it, but like the ability to choose whether somebody lives or dies, I guess, is one way you would talk about Deadpool, right? Yeah. I bet you could Google what the body count of the movie is. I bet it's high. You're not going to help me with that one? Thanks. All right. While central to the role of the superhero is also a hallmark of masculinity. All right. So what have we done? For sure. This is legit. It really is. And look, just because at the end I want to make sure we know what we've done. That's our introduction to the text. That's it. We got real specific by the end. You guys did that. You guys took us more than we really need, right? Excellent, excellent. Then we get into what we start talking about in the paper. Our roadmap runs to about there. It could be a little longer. Our thesis could be a little shorter, maybe. But either way, we're just diving into the paper. We're talking about power and what it means for Deadpool, what it means for masculinity, what it means for superheroes. Then we move to violence. Why is there so much violence in this movie? Well, because it's a superhero movie. That's our argument, right? And again, it's satire, but what is it satirizing? It is satirizing superhero movies. What that means is it takes superhero movies like to their ultimate expression. It takes them too far. But that means it's still a superhero movie. So anything we say about Deadpool is probably applicable to all these other movies, right? That's what we're saying. And that gets us to here. It's a superhero movie because heroes choose their own path. I guarantee that's on like different posters for like Captain America or whatever. He chose his own path, or like some shit like that, right? But this movie asks you to think, like, take it to its logical conclusion. What does choosing your own path mean, especially if you're strong enough to throw a building or have lasers come out of your eyes or whatever, right? It means you're killing folks. You just are. There's no other way for that to go. That's the ultimate power, as you guys pointed out. And if masculinity, in one way, shape, or form, is, we keep saying defined, but measured might be a better term, right? If it's measured by that, then aren't these movies, Deadpool is sort of commenting on, aren't these movies sort of suggesting that to be ultimately masculine is to have that power and maybe even use it? Does that make sense? This is great. You guys did great. For real. Now look, this paper doesn't exist yet, so this can and perhaps should change as you go. That's how drafting works, right? All I want you to take away from this is, even if you do surgery like we did today on that one paragraph, which quite honestly I think is 2 paragraphs, you would attack both those new paragraphs. Okay, fine. New topic sentences, evidence in the second, all that stuff. But then when you start to work them into an introduction, you see what you got there. Well, now it turns out maybe the focus of our paper is different from what we thought. That's okay. That's fine. What it probably means is 2 things. One, I would almost guarantee you don't have to throw out nearly as much as your paper as you're worried you have to throw out right now. I understand that's a primary concern. What's likely, most of the evidence you've probably pulled from the movie, you can still use, okay? As long as it's specific. Now, you may have to cut parts, like we did in the first paragraph. It was too general, there was too much, right? What details are you going to focus on? Take that stuff. I guarantee you have a lot of it in there still. Focus on those details, see where it takes you, especially if you have any of this stuff in mind already. That's going to guide you a little bit when you go looking, right? For instance, we didn't get to talk about it, but the candy cane business is ridiculous. It is evocative of like childhood and innocence and all this stuff, but it's sticking out of his chest, right?
It's like Coach on his hand.
Yeah. So we've impaled him with this image of childhood innocence and nostalgia and like Christmas songs and whatever, right? Christmas carols. Why do that? In this supremely not innocent scene. One reason might be to highlight how innocent it's not. Do you know what I mean? Like if they want you thinking of a candy cane just for a second, does he pull it out of himself, by the way? No?
He never shows that he did.
Okay, that would
He
be...
burns. I mean, the whole building burns down, and
Jesus Christ.
he's essentially stuck with 2-inch rebar.
Yeah. Okay. Even that, like like why give you that image, basically? You know? Those are the kind of questions you have to ask, both in your films, okay? Questions about any of that? Anything we did? They could be, if you think it's a dumb question, it's fine. I don't care.
I think at this point it's just more frustration than it is question.
It's okay. It's all good. Like it's okay to be frustrated. You're allowed. But also, again, unfortunately, I suppose, that is part of the process. It honestly is. I've written a lot. I've been frustrated a lot. Like it is part of it. So you're in a good space. I know it doesn't feel good, but you're in a good space. That wasn't really a question, but that's okay. Are there any questions? Okay. Okay. Here's what we're gonna try to do. I always forget. I don't have a head for numbers. We got here at 11:30. All right. We have basically no time for you to draft. I'm gonna let you for a couple minutes. Anything you want to do. We did two things today. We did more reverse outlining, which is where you do your best to honestly assess what you have, right? Break it into the parts. Take a body paragraph, topic sentence, evidence, analysis, and then assess those parts. Am I making an argument in my topic sentence? Am I dealing with details in the evidence? First of all, do I have too much evidence? Which we did, okay? But then once you trim some of that, what details am I working with? If I'm not, well then I need to fix that, right? And that will bolster your analysis. If you do that, you will do very well on this paper.